Today is drone day on Cars, Drones, Computers, so we're going to be building a Floss 2 frame with some T-Motor F40 Pro V1s. Got a decal for the DJI Spark, and then I'll do a little flight afterwards. So let's get right into it. So step one is clean up all this mess. So here we have the components that I'll be using today. So I'll be using a Mach 1 VTX with a Valcor micro camera. I'll use the F40 Pro version 1s. I spent some time last night trying to see if I wanted to use this green sleeving or not, and I don't think I'm going to. I'm just going to do another little thing that I do. I'm going to be using my Revolt V1 flight controller with an XSR. I had this off of another build, so I figured I might as well reuse that. And then for ESC, I'm using the Lumineer 50 amp 4-in-1 BL Heli 32 ESC. I also have a few printed out mounts and some extra little pieces of silicone wire. I like to use a build tray, so right here we have the motor screws, and it's just good to put components there, and with the bright background it's a lot easier to see these things and you don't have to worry about them rolling away. So over here, go ahead and take a quick look at our tools. I'm using I believe it's like a $14 soldering iron off of Amazon with a pretty large tip. It's a personal preference thing. Of course, you'd be using an 8mm nut driver. I'll have the Phillips, a straight blade, a 2mm high torque, 1.5mm, and then another 2.5mm. So this was for motor screws, this will be for camera screws, and this is just about every other screw in the build. I actually also have another one of these, but kind of prefer this handle because it's a little bit bigger around and lets you get a little bit better grip on it. Using some Hakko $5 Amazon flush cutters, highly recommend these. Links will be in the description for those. I'll use RDQ's 3862 solder, and of course a lighter here to heat up the heat shrink. So my favorite prop for the last couple of months has definitely been the T-Motor 5143s, and of course it's green, so that's the prop I'll be putting on this. So let me go ahead and start the build. Real quick though, before we get started, got the DJI Spark here, and sticker sheet just came in for it, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that on real quick. That looks a little bit better. So basically the easiest way is to line up the DJI logo right here, trying to make sure everything's nice and centered and even space all the way around it, and the rest of it just line up pretty good, even the side vents. I really like how it shows you the cooling fan right here and how the cooling vents work, and then I believe this is the GPS module, or maybe this is the GPS and that's the main processing chip. But pretty cool overall. I really think it's a pretty clever design, and I don't know, I guess it appeals to my inner nerd. Anyways, that looks better. Now let's get back to the quad. One other thing I'd like to preface this video too is that this is not a how-to. This is simply me just sharing my build with you all. And some of you may not like my build technique, the soldering tip I use, the motors, the combination, the parts, even the flight controller. And really, I think that each person who builds a quad should build it to suit their needs and build it to something that they're comfortable with. It's something that they enjoy flying. Not all of these components are the latest and greatest. Some of these things, like these motors, have been out for a pretty long time, but they're one of my favorite motors. I'm still gonna keep using them. A lot of people in this hobby seem to all get wrapped around, you gotta do it this way and you gotta do it that way. And if you're watching me build this here and you wanna build it exactly like me, it'll probably fly. It may not be the very best process, and this is not meant to be an instructional or how-to or anything like that. This is just my build style and how I do things. If you guys would like to do it differently, I have no objections. This really isn't about that. With that being said, I figured I might as well get that out of the way now, because I'm sure there's gonna be some hate in the comments on me not doing this the way everybody wants, but that's not why I'm in this hobby, you know? I'm in this hobby because I enjoy flying and I also enjoy building. So let's go ahead and get started. So last night I already mounted this here. I spent some time just kind of looking at the build and seeing exactly how I wanted to build it. I fly Flight 1, have been now, back even when it was race flight and the beta build, so I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I thought about switching over to the millivolt. I've never used a millivolt, and putting it in with this here, but this is a 20-gram weight ESC. It's a pretty heavy duty one. I ran F80 Pros with it. It did just fine, and I use it in pretty much all my builds. I prefer a little bit heavier weight if it adds some reliability. I know there's some newer products out that are doing really good, but back when I bought these are like 58 bucks, and there wasn't much to beat it for the price. I'm going to go ahead and use a old Revolt V1. Use the XSR already attached to it and already has the plug for the CSC, so it'll be a pretty quick and easy build for me. Today I will not be soldering up one of these flight controllers. There's plenty of videos online on how to do that, so if you do need an instructional, I would recommend going to those. Now, I don't use OSD, I don't use smart audio, I don't race. I would say this is probably more of a racing style frame, 5mm arms. I actually just want to do it for a non-GoPro, try out new trick squad. And I know these are pretty quality frames. This is the Floss version 2, not the 2.1. Has the individual arms, and got this from a friend who gave me a good deal on it. So here's the top plate, so that's what it looks like with it all mounted. I'm sure you all probably know. If you're watching this video, you may know what a Floss looks like. But for my viewers who are maybe not into racing drones, this is the Pyro Drone Floss 2.0. I think this frame did retail for right around $50. I did add my own standoffs when I got it. They were a little bit taller, and I just had a little bit newer ones. This frame's already been flown and used, so kind of more of a rebuild than anything, than a brand new build. I put this net on right here, and I'm not sure I really want to use that, so I'm probably going to take this off. And then years ago, I started putting this on quads, and I know a lot of people do nowadays. And you can pick this carbon vinyl up on Amazon for a pretty economical price, and I use it for like inside my Mercedes E55. I have some left over, and then I basically just run the motor wires and then wrap the arm with this here stuff. I heat it up a little bit to really stretch it, and then it looks pretty nice, and it's also more aerodynamic. The motor's mounted, then I'll wrap them after I solder them. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all 4 screws in each and every one of these motors, and then I'll come back right after I get done. So for you guys, it'll be just a couple of seconds. All 4 motors are now fully screwed down and everything's tight, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'll show you guys while I complete this first solder for these here. So I'm just gonna run the wires like right here, and then solder them to the 3 motor outs right here on the 4-in-1 ESC. Then I'll just go ahead and finish up the rest of them, so y'all ain't sitting here watching me for 5 minutes solder up these things. And then we'll go on to the next step. Figuring out exactly where I want this. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out 4 more of these. Okay, so I got 4 pieces cut out. Now I'm gonna go ahead and apply them on each of the 4 arms. What I do is just peel the whole thing off, start on the wires. I press all the wires flat. Go ahead and heat it up here a little bit. I don't like fighting this stuff. And each step, I just heat it up a little, pull it tight. And there we go. It makes a pretty nice, clean, aerodynamic, and keeps the carbon fiber look. So then all I have to do then is just land the wires right here. I'll leave a little bit of slack just in case the arm breaks, and should be good to go. I don't recommend you ever do this if you have an ESC, because if the ESC ever goes to light on fire right here, this stuff does catch fire. Ask me how I know. Anyways, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the other 3. All right, so now that I got all 4 of these here done and wrapped, I'm going to trim these wires up and then pre-tin them and solder them on to the 4-in-1 ESC, just about like that. I'm gonna leave a little bit of slack here. Cut these pretty much flush like that. I noticed that when I was soldering on that first motor wire, that the edges of my positive and negative here on the 4-in-1 ESC, remount it here real quickly, they just ever so slightly contact this arm. So I could do 2 different things. I could either trim the arm down a little bit, or I could trim the ESC down a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and just grind off the corner of the ESC just to make sure that everything's clear. That way, if I ever replace the arm or anything like that, I don't have to worry about whether or not it's already trimmed to the right. I don't need no things shorting out here, because this is direct battery end voltage. Alright, so that seems a little bit better once it's sitting there and actually clears the arm a little bit. So while I had the ESC off, I decided to go ahead and make up my pigtail. I prefer to just use 2 black wires, and it's not that I don't have another color for the positive, it's just don't really see the need for it. I pay attention to exactly what I soldered to what, and right here on the plug it says positive and negative. So I do really like these plugs that actually have the hole that recesses all the way down into the XT60 instead of the ones you just solder onto the end. They tend to break off. This one I picked up from Catalyst Machine Works. I think it was $1, but definitely like it better. So now I got it soldered. I'm just gonna go ahead and cover up the solder joint, get the heat shrink going there, go ahead and do the other one, and then solder this right on the underside of this here, and I'll have my pigtail done. Okay, so now got a couple of the wires done. Go ahead and took me quite a while to get anywhere with this build. So far, going pretty slow. But sometimes that's just how it goes. And go ahead, boom. Just like that. That isn't too bad, it's pretty solid. Even got a little bit of slack, so go ahead and do the rest of them. So now that I got the ESC mounted, and go ahead and plug it in here, make sure everything works good. There we go, good to go there. I'll go ahead and use this harness and this little bit of wire. Power wires for the flight controller are done, and the VTX as well as the camera. So I've got the camera wiring done, and that's gonna solder on just like that. And then this here is the video signal wire. I also got a little pigtail here now off of the Mach 1 VTX, so I just need to solder the video onto that, solder the power onto there, and then the whole FPV system is done. And I forgot that the flight controller is powered through the ESC plug, which then in turn powers my receiver through the flight controller, so that way it eliminates one less thing of wiring. Now that I've got the VTX and the camera soldered together and everything soldered here to the power in, this will sit right on top of the flight controller. Plug in this antenna. So I went ahead and got the radio receivers oriented the way I like to have them, and have the VTX here. So now all I gotta do is put on the top plate just like this, put on the battery strap, and really close to being ready for its maiden. So I went ahead and glued down the TPU protector here with Super 77. I still want to get some UMA grip or something like that. This isn't really high traction, but it is a nice little space out so that the battery's not getting punctured by these screws when it sits here. I like to use these 1500 milliamp mini stars, and I rewrapped them so that they're green because that's my favorite color. Yeah, now I'm gonna go hook it into the configurator on Flight 1 and get everything set up, which shouldn't take me but a few minutes, and go ahead and give it some maiden after I put the props on. Put on some A-band props, we'll see how those do. I got it all calibrated and set up in Flight 1. So I've got a fresh pack here, and let's go ahead and do the maiden flight, and my brave wife is gonna film this while I fly. And we're back. So far, flew really well. I'm really happy with the build. Seems to be pretty fast, which is expected. Really wasn't concerned about weight because it's way lighter than what I usually fly here. The smooth operator frame, all up weight with GoPro and everything. I think I'm running about 642 grams, including battery. So this here with battery is 489 grams. I will probably put a GoPro mount on this just to get some flight footage, but most of it's, I'll just leave it off. So this is really meant to try out new moves and even work on speed runs. This here will still be my main freestyle quad. I'm really a fan of this. They definitely have different flight characteristics. This one being more of a H-style X and this one being a stretch X. But overall, it's a pretty nice quad, and I am going to add some little bit stickier material down here because the TPU did help the battery, but it is not very grippy, so I'm going to get something a little bit different. So that concludes this build here of the Floss 2. I'm going to be flying it probably tomorrow. Hopefully I can get a little bit of time in, but I'm also working on some other content for you guys. So thank you for watching this episode of Cars, Drones, Computers. If you liked it and you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. And also, if you liked today's episode, hit that like button. So thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.